Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Secrets of the Silver Lion, a Carmen Sandiego novel, by Emma Otheguy, narrated by Kyla García. The character Carmen Sandiego, including without limitation the character's name in English and any variations, translations, or local versions thereof, and the character's likenesses, are registered trademarks of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt IP LLC. Carmen Sandiego and associated logos and design are trademarks of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt IP LLC and used under license. Chapter 1. Carmen Sandiego moved soundlessly around the deserted terrace, expertly avoiding loose stones and dodging security cameras. In the morning, there would be no evidence that an international thief had been there. Carmen was a pro. "This place sure is quiet for New York City," Carmen said into her comlink earring. The terrace was several steps up from the street, and it had been 10 minutes since the last car went by. At the far end of the terrace was a stately museum. Carmen thought it looked like a place where someone self-important would live. The voice on the other end of Carmen's earring was cheerful. Even though they had never met in person, Player was Carmen's best friend. They were partners in fighting Vile, the Villains International League of Evil, and spoke every single day. Player was always ready with encouragement and quick facts, and now was no different. "It's the middle of the night, Red. What were you expecting? A welcome band?" "Whatever happened to the city that never sleeps?" "No one uses this terrace at night. It's all yours, Red. That is, unless our friends show up." Carmen smiled sneakily to herself. She had reasons to believe that operatives from Vile would be coming to ransack the museum. But with any luck, Carmen would thwart their plans and keep the museum's treasures safe. She could just imagine the faces of criminals like Countess Cleo and Professor Maelstrom, or better yet her arch-rival Tigress, when they realized that Carmen had beaten them to their prize. Carmen had once been a student criminal in training at Vile Academy. Ever since Carmen escaped from the academy and started fighting evil, she had tried to stay one step ahead of Vile. "I think I found the spot." Carmen focused on a ledge just below a second-story window. It was narrow, but it looked sturdy, and there were no bars on the window. "Go for it." Carmen reached into her red trench coat, wound up her arm, and pitched her grappling hook toward the ledge. "Got it!" As soundlessly as she had walked around the terrace, Carmen now shinnied up the rope. When she reached the top of the ledge, she gathered the grappling hook back into her coat and sneaked a peek over her shoulder. The view from above was impressive. To the west, the Hudson River glimmered, and to the south, the lights on Broadway snaked deep into the city. Carmen turned back to the window. It took her 2 tries to pick the lock before the window finally opened. Carmen listened for sounds inside, but the museum was empty. She was completely alone. Still crouched on the ledge, Carmen used her flashlight to figure out where she was. The window opened onto a grand exhibit hall filled with richly woven tapestries, silver candlesticks, and elegant vases. It wasn't a far jump, and Carmen landed on her feet. The exhibit hall was packed with stuff Vile would love. She could just imagine Professor Maelstrom melting down those silver candlesticks for cufflinks, like he once wanted to do with an Ecuadorian doubloon. But Carmen knew that Vile was after a bigger prize than the knickknacks in this third-floor gallery. She spotted the stairs and quickly made her way to the ground floor. Luckily, Player had found floor plans, which Carmen had studied carefully. On the ground floor, Carmen moved toward the front doors. They were heavy, studded with metal, and secured from the inside with multiple locks. Carmen would deal with those later. Right now, she had one mission. "Once you get to the doors, it's to your right," Player instructed. Carmen turned and faced a long, narrow hallway. She shone her flashlight, which illuminated only shadows and a worn stone floor. Past the reach of the light, the hallway continued like a pitch-black tunnel. Carmen squared her shoulders and strode down the hallway, holding the flashlight out in front of her. A sparkle caught the light. As Carmen neared the end of the hallway, she could just make out a silver shape, about the size of her palm. She drew closer, until she could clearly see that it was a silver carving in the shape of an arrow. "Do you see it yet?" Player asked into her ear. Carmen raised her flashlight. She whistled. "I see it." The silver arrow was nestled into the base of a mahogany throne. The base was intricately carved with scrolls and curlicues, and the legs of the throne were shaped like enormous claws. The arms were fashioned like the heads of 2 roaring lions. On the seat was a velvet cushion, now threadbare. "The museum's most prized possession," Player announced. "It was commissioned by King Felipe IV of Spain in 1621. "The man clearly had money," Carmen remarked. "But I don't know about taste." The throne was foreboding. "I think the idea was to intimidate people," Player said. "But that's not why that throne is valuable. It's actually that silver arrow." Carmen examined the arrow carefully inlaid on the base of the throne. On either side of it were hollowed-out spaces, like molds that were never filled. "You see the space for the castle and the lion on either side of the arrow?" Player asked. "King Felipe IV also commissioned silver inlays for those spots. They were definitely made, because there are documents confirming it. But somehow the castle and the lion never got to the throne." Carmen leaned in closer. "The detail on this arrow is amazing. It's almost as if the feather at the end were real. I wish I could see it in proper lighting." She straightened up. "But I need to figure out what Vial is planning." "Do you, black sheep?" Carmen whirled around, dropping her flashlight in surprise. No one had called her Black Sheep since her days at Vial Academy. Someone flipped a switch, and the hallway was flooded with overhead fluorescence. Carmen covered her face to shade her unadjusted eyes. "I see our little friend is here," said a sing-song voice. "So predictable." Carmen lowered her hands, still blinking. She gritted her teeth at the person now advancing on her. "I was a year ahead of you, Paper Star. Don't call me little." Paper Star smiled sweetly. "But did you graduate ahead of me, Black Sheep?" She skipped past Carmen. Her platform patent leather boots squeaked against the tiled floor. "No, I didn't think so," Paper Star said. "So you see, I think little is just the right word for you. Little thief, little amateur. Oh, look." Paper Star hopped onto the throne and crossed her ankles primly. "From up here, little person." Carmen's eyes narrowed. "Get off that throne before I make you, Paper Star." "As if you could." Paper Star lunged suddenly, throwing an origami star in Carmen's direction. Carmen ducked as the star whipped through the air and sliced past her ear. Now Paper Star emptied her pockets, and the paper weapons came faster and faster, thinner and sharper each time. Carmen retreated, ducking, running, and rolling to dodge the stars. At the end of the hallway, she turned left and ran, racing through the galleries, taking every turn she could to try and shake Paper Star. "You'd think those boots would slow her down, but no!" Carmen shouted to Player, panting as she ran. She hung a sharp left and shrank into the shadows. Paper Star ran past, and Carmen caught her breath as the sound of Paper Star's squeaky boots faded away. "Player?" Carmen hissed into her earpiece. "I've got to get this throne to a secure location. I can't keep it safe here. I think I've got 5 minutes tops. Get Ivy. I need backup." She darted back the way she came and yanked open the door of the first supply closet she found. "Yes! Here's a cart!" Carmen grabbed the handle and ran back toward the throne, not even bothering to be quiet. It wouldn't take Paper Star long to figure out where she had gone. Grunting, Carmen nudged the throne onto the cart. Under her trench coat, she was dripping with sweat. The front door rattled. Ivy, Carmen thought, praying her friend and partner in adventure was at the ready. She pushed the cart as hard as she could, then leaped onto its base, leaning over the throne like a skier as the cart, the throne, and Carmen hurtled toward the front door. Something sailed across the doorway, and Carmen knew Paper Star was back. But if she could just beat her to the door and meet Ivy... "Arg!" Paper Star yelled as she hurtled her body at the cart, pushing it back into the museum and knocking Carmen to the ground. The doors burst open, and Carmen heard Ivy yelling her name. Seconds later, Carmen heard Paper Star shouting shrilly, "You two, get the throne! I'll put Black Sheep out of commission." Somewhere in the distance, Carmen heard the voices of Le Chèvre and El Topo, two of Vile's top operatives. "Please let Ivy get the throne before them," Carmen said to herself. "Ivy, get the throne." If she could lead Paper Star away from the museum for long enough, please get it. Please get it. Carmen reached the window and jumped onto the ledge, with Paper Star only seconds behind. Chapter 2. Ivy pushed open the heavy doors. "I'm coming, Carmen," she hollered, then stopped in place. A cart loaded with an imposing wooden throne was careening away from the entrance. Not at all the direction they wanted. Suddenly, Ivy noticed a flash of red, and then Paper Star, one of Vile's most dangerous villains, leaped off the cart and tore after Carmen, throwing paper darts. "Come back here!" Ivy shouted. Then she took a second look at the cart and frowned. It looked like Vile had been trying to steal it, and if Vile was taking it from the museum, that could only mean one thing. Carmen would want the throne moved to a secure location. Ivy rolled up her sleeves. Carmen was the Vile expert, Ivy was the gadget expert, and carts were a gadget. She allowed herself one last fist shake at Paper Star's retreating figure before getting to work. "That's my friend you're chasing," she muttered. A dry voice behind her replied, "And you're such a good friend to load up this cart for us." "Le Chèvre!" Ivy put her hands on her hips, storming back toward the door. Le Chèvre was one of her least favorite Vile operatives. His name meant the goat in French, because he could climb up anything, like a real goat. He had a habit of getting in Ivy's way. "I was going to climb up this side of the building," Le Chèvre said gleefully. "But now I see that isn't necessary." Ivy lunged at the cart, stopping it halfway down the hallway. "You'll have to get past me first," she said. "Or not," Le Chèvre replied happily. El Topo, another Vile operative, came out of the shadows and appeared at Le Chèvre's shoulder. 2 against 1. Ivy grabbed the cart with both hands and ran, pushing the cart as hard as she could toward the door. As the heavy throne drew closer, Le Chèvre and El Topo leaped out of the way, and Ivy cheered as the cart cruised through the open doors and into the night. It would have been a great plan if the uneven flagstones of the terrace hadn't slowed down the cart. It clunked only a few feet before stopping completely. Ivy had to use all her strength to keep pushing, and the cart moved slowly. So slowly that Le Chèvre and El Topo overtook her and wrestled the cart from her. After all, it was 2 against 1. Ivy put her fingers in her mouth and blew 2 short whistles as loudly as she could. A New York City bus pulled up, blocking the exit from the terrace. "Bad news," Ivy called at Le Chèvre and El Topo. "That was the only way out of here." Le Chèvre pushed the cart to the very edge of the terrace and looked down at the bus. "Hey, driver," he called. "Get out of our way. Very important museum personnel here." Ivy snorted. "Good luck with that. That's not just any bus driver, you know." As if on cue, a redhead tipped his Red Sox cap at Le Chèvre. He lowered the window and shouted, "Anything I can help you with, sir? Special rates on Thrones tonight, system-wide." The 2 vial operatives narrowed their eyes, and Ivy rubbed her hands together. She had them cornered now for sure. The driver was her brother Zach. He was always there to lend a hand on Carmen's capers, and plus, he had learned to drive just about any vehicle when the 2 of them were growing up in Boston. There was just one thing Ivy had forgotten: Le Chèvre's incredible climbing abilities. Within seconds, he had shinnied up a tree overhanging the terrace and dropped out of sight onto the street below. "Guess your friend abandoned you," Ivy said to El Topo. "And guess I'll be taking that back now." She lunged for the cart, but El Topo wheeled it away from her. As she chased him across the terrace, Le Chèvre reappeared carrying a spare piece of lumber? Ivy stepped closer to Le Chèvre. She did some quick thinking, then, "Zach!" Ivy yelled. "They're going to try and catapult it!" She raced after the 2 vial operatives, shaking her fist at them. "That thing ain't worth nothing if you break it, you clowns!" But Le Chèvre was sliding the plank under the throne even as she ran, and before Ivy could say catapult, El Topo was stomping on the other end, and the throne was sailing through the air. The 2 vial operatives took off running with Ivy following close behind. While they climbed up a tree, Ivy hurled herself through the open window of the bus. "There they are!" Zach shouted. The throne landed softly in a dumpster, sending up a flutter of styrofoam packing peanuts. "They filled the dumpster with packing peanuts?" Zach said. "I gotta hand it to them. That's some smart thinking. They had to know exactly where the throne would land to pull that off." "Smart?" Ivy said. "They're taking off with our throne, and you're giving them compliments? Look, they're already loading it into a van." She pointed as Le Chèvre and El Topo tilted the dumpster and heaved the throne into the back of a van. "Step on it, bro!" Zach slammed on the gas, but the big bus accelerated slowly while the van zoomed 2 blocks ahead. Zach leaned over the steering wheel and gritted his teeth, willing the bus to go faster. They sped through 2 red lights, almost closing the distance between the bus and the van. But as the chase took them farther downtown, the streets filled with cars and pedestrians. So this was the city that never slept. "Slow down, bro! You're gonna hit someone!" Ivy yelled. A group of late-night revelers were crossing the street, singing merrily. Zach slammed on the brakes, and Ivy clutched the bar with both hands as the force thrust her forward. Zach drummed his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel as people crossed. By the time the street was clear, the van was long gone, and a woman was tapping on the door, waving her bus pass at Zach. "Uh-oh," Zach said. "Didn't think someone might actually want to ride the bus?" Ivy asked. "Planning error," Zach agreed. He opened the door briefly. We're closed, miss.
No bus service tonight."
The woman protested, holding up the heavy bag she was carrying. But Zach yanked the doors closed again.
"Sorry, ma'am,"
he yelled over his shoulder as the light turned green and he slammed on the gas once more.
"We're too late,"
Ivy exclaimed.
"They got away from us." "What now?"
Zach asked, slumping over the steering wheel.
"Zach, look!"
Zach pulled over in the bus lane and craned his neck. They were just below the George Washington Bridge, and the trail of lights connecting each pillar looked like Christmas garlands strung with twinkling lights. But that wasn't what Ivy was pointing at. With a squint, Zach made out two dark silhouettes on the top of one of the bridge's high pillars. One of the silhouettes had two buns on each side of her head, and the other wore a fedora and a trench coat.
"Carmen's all the way up there,"
Ivy said. The bus lurched forward as Zach pulled a U-turn. Cars honked angrily at him, but Ivy cheered.
"We're coming, Carm!"
Zach slammed on the brakes and parked at the foot of the bridge.
"We need to send up a signal,"
he said.
"Think fast, sis." "Let's take a page out of Le Chèvre and El Topo's book and use some leverage."
Ivy grabbed Zach's hat off of his head and hopped out of the bus. She found a spare tire kit in the back of the bus and borrowed an inner tube. Then she stood as close under the bridge as she could, loaded the hat into the tube, pulled it as taut as it would go, and slingshot the hat toward Carmen.
"Come on, come on, come on,"
she said to herself. She watched as it sailed through the sky and descended, right on top of Carmen's fedora.
"Good aim,"
Zach called from the driver's seat. And it worked like a charm. Carmen looked down, and Zach and Ivy waved their arms wildly. Carmen unfurled her glider backpack and leaped away from Paper Star, landing on the top of the bus. She army crawled over to the window and leaned inside.
"Nice getaway vehicle, Zach."
Chapter 3. The next morning, the spot where Zach had blocked off the entrance to the museum was now taken up by a police car. In fact, the whole neighborhood was swarming with police cars. Cops in uniform were taking statements from people on the street, and a TV news crew had just pulled up in front of the museum. Everyone was talking about the mysterious disappearance of the Throne of Felipe. "These thieves were smooth," a news anchor was saying into a microphone. "Detectives have been searching the premises since early morning, but the robbers split without a trace."
"I practically handed the throne to them," Carmen grumbled.
"I guess we better see if anyone in the museum knows anything." The museum had a complicated security line after the theft yesterday, but eventually they made their way into the museum and back to the long, narrow hallway, now brightly lit and crowded with people gawking at the scene of the crime. The spot where the throne had been was roped off with police tape. Carmen made her way to the front of the crowd, while Zach and Ivy fanned out to look for evidence. The area where the base of the throne had sat was a slightly different color from the rest of the floor and left a perfect outline of where the throne should be. To Carmen, it looked like the last piece of a puzzle, waiting to be added. She sighed sadly. She had been so close to stopping Vile. Now the throne was probably being sold to other criminals, and Countess Cleo was probably shopping for rubies and diamond earrings. Someone sighed to Carmen's left, echoing her sadness. Carmen looked up and saw a woman with long black hair. There was a name tag pinned to her blouse. She looked miserable. "Do you work here?" Carmen stopped to take another look at the woman's name tag.
"Milagros?"
Milagros gave Carmen a small smile.
"You can call me Millie,"
she said kindly.
"And yes, I'm a curator here. I help plan the exhibits. Although right now, I don't really know what I am. I've been working on this throne for years. Now it's gone.
She looked like she might cry. You don't have any idea who could have stolen it? Carmen asked eagerly.
None at all. Of course, the throne had been getting attention last week.
Carmen nodded knowingly. She had been following the news since last Tuesday, when it was announced that one of the missing inlays from the base of the throne had been discovered in Seville, Spain. The silver castle, the shape meant to be placed just to the left of the arrow, had been found in a secret vault. A researcher had been exploring the Archivo General de Indias, an enormous library of old documents in Seville, when she stumbled upon a trapdoor that led down to a maze of tunnels below the city. No one had set foot in the tunnels for centuries until this researcher found the trapdoor and the vault with the missing silver castle.
The throne on its own is valuable, Millie continued, because mahogany is expensive wood, and of course, silver is costly too. But it's the two together that are the real prize for criminals, I think. The throne reunited with its silver inlays would fetch an astronomical sum on the black market. Someone must have heard about them on the news last week and decided to come steal the throne.
And I know who that someone is, Carmen thought. Millie stared ahead at the spot where the throne had been. She blinked several times. Hesitantly, Carmen put her hand on Millie's shoulder.
This throne must have meant a lot to you. Oh, it's been a fascinating project, Millie said. The details on the silver arrow were incredible. Some of the finest artistry I've ever seen in silver work. Even after all these centuries, it's still perfect. You look at the silver arrow, and you can almost imagine that it's a real feather on the end.
Carmen felt a rush of affection for Millie. She had thought the exact same thing when she saw the arrow last night. It had been remarkable. There was hardly any time with Paper Star on her trail, but now that it was stolen, she wished she had taken more time to appreciate it.
The silver castle was supposed to be delivered here from Spain next week, Millie went on, so that we could attach it to its spot on the base of the throne. I was so looking forward to seeing it.
Suddenly, Carmen had a thought that filled her with dread.
Millie,
she said sharply, has anyone contacted the people in Spain? If the throne was stolen because of the silver arrow, I can't imagine the same people aren't after the silver castle. Millie's eyes grew wide.
You don't think... I thought for sure it was a local thief, just someone from New York.
And I know for sure it was a band of international criminals, Carmen thought. This theft was a complicated job, she said. I wouldn't rule it out. You said it yourself. It's the two together that would be the real prize. Do you know the people who have the castle? Can you get in touch with them and put them on high alert? Mentally, Carmen was already trying to calculate when the next flight to Spain would be. She couldn't let the silver castle be stolen along with the throne.
I could, Millie said. It's on display at the Archivo until next week, when it was supposed to be sent here. I have to go contact them.
Looking frantic, Millie started to walk away, then broke into a run. Carmen was left standing alone, surrounded by people speculating about the theft. Maybe they broke in through a window, said a woman in high heels.
Or they disguised themselves as movers,
suggested another. Carmen shook her head. These theories were getting wilder and wilder. She wondered if the throne had gotten this much interest before it was stolen. She pushed through the crowd and headed toward the door. She needed to touch base with Player and get herself to Spain. Just as she was reaching the exit, someone tapped on her shoulder. It was Millie. She was out of breath.
I'm sorry, Millie said. I made the call. They've put everyone on high alert and are adding
Sample complete. Ready to continue?